who represents our emerging research institution members of FDP. And we're so pleased to have our NSF colleagues from the Growing Research Access for Nationally Transformative Equity and Diversity, or GRANTED program, here with us today as we close out our meeting this afternoon. This session will include an opportunity to join breakout rooms, and then we'll hear report outs and have some discussion before we wrap up. GRANTED is a new NSF program under the Office of Integrative Activities at NSF. And at our January meeting, I had the pleasure of introducing Dr. Needler, who introduced GRANTED to the FDP. Today, we've got Kim Littlefield, who came to GRANTED from UNC Greensboro, serving as Associate Vice Chancellor for Research and Engagement, and Dina Stroud, who most recently has served Vanderbilt University and Fisk University through their Master's to PhD Bridge program. As GRANTED gets off the ground, Kim and Dina are serving as program directors for GRANTED. And I know this is going to be an interesting and informative session. Now I'm going to say to my colleague Kimberly from Emory, take it away.
Hey, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Last session, last one, best one. I'm so excited to be on the screen and share the screen with these ladies for a few minutes here. You have heard their introduction, so I'm not going to repeat that. I'm just going to say, get ready to have put your thinking caps on and have some really interesting discussion. There have been a couple of DCLs that have come out recently about this program, including one that was circulated today that I think we'll be hearing about. So I'm going to pass it off to Kim Littlefield.
Thanks, Kimberly. Thanks, Susan. Thanks, Sarah. And hello, everybody. We know this is the last session before the meeting closes. I know you've had a great meeting thus far. We want you to leave this session feeling energized. So we've got not only some great information to share, but we think of this community as thought partners, as experts. And so we're going to ask you for your insights and to generate some information that we hope we can take back that will inform how we structure some next steps in GRANTED. But before we do that, just thought we'd warm up the room a little bit with a couple of polls. And so, Sarah, I'm going to stop sharing, and then maybe we can put those up. Okay, so we want to know what people know about the GRANTED initiative, so that we know sort of how to calibrate our introduction. Okay, very interesting. Very interesting. This is great. I'm glad we're here. Well, so why don't we go ahead to poll number 2, which asks folks, if you know a little bit about it, and you've been thinking about perhaps putting in a proposal. Let's talk about what you might be thinking about in terms of proposal. Oh, do I have to share the results, or did you share the results, Sarah? Okay, results have been shared. Okay, great. Okay, so here's poll number 2. If you're planning a GRANTED proposal but haven't submitted it yet, what's standing in your way? These are the types of things we're going to talk about today. All right, so a lot of folks have not thought about submitting. Hard to narrow down an idea. Don't have time. And all these, we hear all of these choices. So, but again, I think it's really good that we're here. Again, thank you for attending this session. And I guess we can go ahead and end the polls. We have some good information to take back with us. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so can someone give me a thumbs up about whether you can see the slide? Of course, I can't see anybody.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we've all been introduced. We're going to talk about GRANTED. I'm Kim Littlefield, as Susan introduced us all. And at this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and the visionary really for the granted program, Alicia Needler. She's going to take us through the next several slides to introduce the granted program. Alicia?
Thank you, Kim.
Sure.
So thanks everybody for joining us. I think as Susan said, I was here last year in January of 23 to talk about Granted, and we were just getting started with Granted. So what a difference about 10 months makes. So we're back to give you a little bit more information. We're continuing to evolve the Granted program. And so we're going to talk a little bit about Granted. We're going to share some insights. We want you to share some insights with us, and then we'll have time for question and answer. So next slide. So first and foremost, just this is general about NSF. Right now, terrific time to apply to NSF for your faculty, for your institutional needs, collaborations and partnerships, regional things, and so on. NSF, as I hope you know, has benefited from an increase in funding, most of it due to the fact that we added a new directorate, the Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships Directorate, TIP, which makes for eight disciplinary directorates and 2 offices that engage in funding. So right now, well, actually with the turn of the fiscal year, still a great time. We're in closeout right now, but we have an exciting FY24 planned, including the Granted Initiative. But we really want you to encourage your faculty, your students, your institutions to think about what kinds of programs would really help you all grow in and meet the goals that you all have. Next slide. So this takes a little bit of animation, so I'll say click when we get there. So in introducing Granted, because it does seem like for some of you, you need an introduction. Granted is all about the building of capacity in the research enterprise. And if you're at the FDP meeting, you pretty much know or participate in the research enterprise. And there are a number of functions or sectors that we've identified just in defining this for the purposes of the Granted program that are usually very well built in a Research 1 institution, but maybe not so well built in other types of institutions. So the functions or the sectors might include research development, and there are definitely some like that kind of cut across. This could be a Venn diagram of sorts and so on. But research development, research training involving students and postdocs and even faculty and so on. Broader impacts, research administration, commercialization, public-private partnerships, economic development, corporate relations, compliance, integrity, research ethics, research policy, research security, research leadership, and so on and so forth. So at a well-resourced institution, and let's go ahead and click a few, there's usually several people in each one of these areas. And so this might be R1, R2, research institutes, medical centers, and so on. However, go ahead and click. At a PUI, some emerging research institutions, and so on, there might be one person or just very few people who represent the research enterprise, and they're wearing a lot of different hats. So we recognize this disparity, this difference. But what's important is that all institutions, all of these organizations contribute to the nation's global competitiveness. And all the students that go to all the different types of institutions deserve fantastic experiences as they're going through their undergraduate and graduate years. And so providing research experiences, very tangible, hands-on kinds of things and so on is beneficial to everyone. And external funding is often needed for that kind of work. So we are interested in the Granted program in making sure that the nation's research enterprise is strong and robust and very accessible no matter where you are, no matter what kind of institution, organization, part of the country, it doesn't really matter. That's what we're doing. And you can kind of think of this as the scaffolding that makes all the rest of NSF be able to do its work. Next slide. So we created this wheel, we call it the Granted wheel. It's an infographic that represents, again, these different kinds of sectors. We know, as we've been promoting Granted the last year, that we have some tweaks to the wheel that we need to do, and we'll be working on that. But what's really more important is that we have funding opportunities behind the Granted program. So here are 3 things that we want to give attention to today. The first one is the Granted program description. Now, hopefully you know something about NSF's funding opportunities. We have program descriptions, we have solicitations, we have dear colleague letters, and we also have broad agency announcements, which, thanks to TIP and NCSES, they primarily participate in those. A program description is meant to be a funding opportunity that is sort of a base of funding and invites all sorts of proposals. The way we've set up Granted is that it's a base of funding. In FY23, we requested about $50 million. We got somewhere in that neighborhood, $45 million approximately. And so that's our base of funding. You apply to the Granted program description with the ideas that you have. We set it up specifically so that there's no deadline, there's no budget cap, there's no budget floor, that's not a limited submission. All these things that you might find irritating about the rest of NSF, we took away. And that's because they're not, you don't have to do those things. So we wanted to make sure we had a program description that was accessible, which is why the A in Granted is there. But we also know throughout the last year that we've received a lot of different types of proposals, and we have a lot of different types of questions. So we actually formed a dear colleague letter to give some advice about writing a Granted proposal. So that has recently come out. And so that would be a go-to document to provide some information. And I think later we'll talk about our office hours and all that kind of stuff. And then we have a brand new dear colleague letter that is kind of focused in one particular area of the Granted wheel, and it's in post-award research support and service infrastructure. We have heard across a lot of conversations with the research enterprise community, and also based on our own experiences in different types of institutions, the post-award management, post-award administration, grants and contracts accounting, it doesn't really matter what you call it, but the post-award services across the nation are not as strong as they probably need to be to support the growth that federal agencies like NSF and DOE and NASA are seeking from Congress to be able to increase resources to institutions in particular, and to build the workforce in STEM and to keep students in STEM programs. So we need very good post-award administration and management to be able to handle increase in funds. And we're also looking for, these are my words that I've been trying out a little bit. We want to see a post-award revolution, I think. We want to see some innovation in post-award. Research development about 15 years ago really made some changes in the pre-award administration space and the proposal development space. We want to see the same kind of thing happen in post-award. So we're very interested in seeing some very innovative ideas come into Granted about post-award services. And we did put a deadline on this particular, well, a target date on this particular DCL, because we found in talking with folks that they kind of appreciate to have a little bit of something out there that says, hey, do it by this date. But you should know that we will accept proposals to the Granted program description at any time. This is just a nudge to get people to pay attention to this one. We will accept all sorts of other types of ideas as well. Everything goes into the funnel of the program description. It's just a dear colleague letter. Think of it as a blinking light that says, hey, don't forget about post-award. We want to see ideas around post-award. All right, next slide. So just really quickly, in case you need to have an actual list written out of different parts of the Granted research enterprise structure, this is how we're defining the research enterprise: human capital, practices, processes, all sorts of things related to these different areas. And in our program description, we have said a strong national research enterprise relies on more than funding for research itself, which is why Granted exists. Next slide. I think this is my last one. So why Granted? Why is it that we establish this? So click. So NSF proposal submissions are declining. and have been for years. So that's one thing that's been a source of conversation throughout the agency. We even have an agency priority goal to increase proposal submissions all across NSF. But we want more proposals because we have an increasing budget. And although there are some people who say, well, wait a minute, if you have fewer proposals and more dollars, then I'll get more money in my in my awards. Well, yes, that's possible too. But we also need to justify to Congress that we have excellent ideas that we need more funding for. So if we don't have enough proposals, or we have declining proposals for years, then this isn't a good signal to Congress. Next. Chips and Science. So that came out was signed in 2022, but has carried us through FY23. And they defined, or Chips and Science legislation defined emerging research institutions. Those institutions that expend less than $50 million in federal research expenditures in any particular year. And so there are a lot of emerging research institutions, even though Granted doesn't set up a barrier to say only ERIs can apply for funding, because we want Granted is about the nation's research enterprise, including R1s, but we want to make sure that ERIs are benefiting from the growth and the things that we are innovating in within this research enterprise. Next. Awareness and knowledge of the research enterprise, its staff and functions really varies. Inside of NSF, I've been in NSF for about 2 years. And when I came in, I kind of asked questions about research development, research security, which we've been growing at NSF. Most of our program officers don't have a very broad view of the research enterprise. So part of the Granted work is also inside NSF, trying to help expose more people at NSF to the research enterprise. Next. So $90 billion in FY21 was expended by colleges and universities. And to expend that amount of money, and even to grow to more money to expend every year, we need an intentional workforce. We need people to not accidentally find these jobs that people are in within the research enterprise, to intentionally train for them and build out capacity and advancement in these positions. So we're very interested in ideas, and we have an ideas slide in a minute that talk about things that we want to do to develop this intentional research enterprise workforce. And then finally, the pandemic had a tremendous influence on the research enterprise workforce. People went into remote positions, teleworking. Some people burned out and quit. Some people retired. So we have seen so much change for this particular type of the STEM workforce that we understand a little bit more about it, but we also recognize that we need to invest in it. So that's another purpose as to why we stood up Granted. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dina. Thank you. Next slide.
Next slide, yeah. All right. Thanks, Alicia. So this is very much not NSF business as usual. And so we are trying to take a much more open and inclusive approach to how we interact with the community and the types of things that we are looking for. So you can find the most information at our program description, PD 23-221Y, Fun NSF number systems. You have to make sure you've got that O included on the end. And it will tell you more about the program. But again, it's not telling you a lot. It's not prescriptive. It's a very open door. We started out with a DCL for conferences and convenings. Those are going to be announced, fully announced very soon. And so that's when we moved on to the program description, which is really then looking for these bold, ambitious ideas. And it's in the name, right? We want to see things that are increasing access. We want ideas that can catalyze national transformation. That does not mean they have to transform the nation's research enterprise tomorrow. I'm always telling people that it's okay for your idea to start small, but you still have to think big. And as Alicia likes to remind us, any idea can be nationally transformative. And we want to address these systemic equity and diversity issues that have created barriers. And when you're looking at research to access to research services and support and infrastructure, these are equity problems. And we're looking at diversity, not just as we sort of traditionally do, but also geographic diversity, diversity of thought, diversity of voices in the research enterprise. And so next spot, next. There we go, next bullet, that's the word I was looking for. The projects really should be fully developed and described within the project description. So you want it to be fleshed out, you know who your collaborators are, clear project goals, supporting background information, descriptions of what the success looks like, and really framed, of course, in intellectual merit and broader impacts, as all NSF proposals are, right? And these should be aligned with the granted themes, which are described in the program description. Next bullet. Okay, so PIs and co-PIs can be research enterprise staff. So this is something that's been a little bit tough for people to, adjust to, but we are looking for the folks that are doing the work to be leading this work. Nobody knows better than you what you need. And so we're really trying to tell people that we don't want to tell you what ideas that we think are right. We want you to be telling us about your ideas. It's one of the reasons that we are here today. We want to be listening and not just talking at you. We want to be engaged in listening to you. And so next bullet. The project costs, and we will say this again. You want to ask for what you need for the scope of the work that you're describing. A lot of times people are very attached to the solicitation. They want that number. How many are you going to award? How much do you have to give away? And we aren't having that conversation. We want you to ask for what you need, right? Next slide. Okay, so this is not a limited submission. You can have multiple proposals from a single institution. It's not like there needs to be any sort of internal competition, because there's a lot of different granted sectors, and maybe one part of your research administration or enterprise wants to apply in one particular area. Maybe there's another idea in a different sort of sector. So it's not a limited submission. There's also, as I said, there's no budget floor, no budget cap. Okay, so just bear that in mind. We don't have a deadline. We are getting these in on a rolling basis. I believe I saw in the chat some folks that submitted theirs yesterday received. So, we appreciate those. We are trying to make sure that we are getting those in and reviewing them in timely manners. And so there's no deadline. We're taking them as they come in. Anyone is eligible. Okay, so anyone in the NSF general eligibility. So look at the proposal and planning preparation guide, and you will see nonprofits, for-profits, higher education institutions of any Carnegie classification. A lot of folks come and say, is it only RIs? Is it only MSIs? It's not. It is all, just the whole gamut. We want everybody there because we need everybody's ideas. We need everybody's help. This is a national problem, and so it needs a national response. It does not fund disciplinary research or graduate student training. It will support graduate student training in research administration, development, tech transfer, in these sectors of the research enterprise. So if it's workforce development around granted sectors, it can support those types of things. And it also supports the management of student training. So maybe you are a small institution that is looking to increase the research that's done at your institution rather than having your students going out. And you want to set up an undergraduate research office or some other type of thing that's going to increase access for your students and is going to increase engagement with external funding, for your faculty. That could be something that would be considered. We don't fund faculty training though. They're offering of grant writing workshops, these types of things that are in that can be funded other places in NSF. We really don't cover those. If you come to us and you have an idea and it belongs someplace else, we will help you figure out the other place it belongs. Because we really want people to be applying to NSF. We're not going to just send you away if it's not granted. We're gonna help you find a way in. Okay. Next slide. Okay. So some of the challenges that are coming up that are being addressed in proposals. So, right. And this one we've covered: assistance and support for research and sponsored activity not equitably experienced. And the thing about that is not just that it's not equitably experienced, but there is a gap in the knowledge by the community in that inequity, those disparities, differences exist, right? A lot of people have a tendency to not realize that everybody doesn't have what they have. And so that influences when you're thinking about a proposal and sort of your expectations or your thoughts about what can be achieved or what can be accomplished, and it's not the same, right? So the next bullet. So we're seeing, and we're hearing this so much from folks. There's just so much turnover, even worse from the pandemic, trying to hire people in, getting them trained, then losing them to a bigger institution with larger, salaries or remote abilities. This is definitely a challenge. So like I said, remote work options have made it so that it may be harder for places to recruit staff. And next bullet. So then, right, so there's training. Again, there's training available for these different types of roles, but that training isn't equitably accessible, right? There's a lot of training through professional societies. Not everyone has institution as part of those professional societies, or maybe they cannot afford an individual's membership to such a place. So we end up seeing, differences in training, not just in differences in access. So next bullet. There are some systemic issues too, things like position titles, salaries, position descriptions, things that we have been talking to with Coupa HR, one of the major human resource societies, and really trying to get some consistency in how these things are described, and also accuracy in what actually happens for these different roles. And also there's a lot of different financial processes in the context of external funding. And so, the places may be used to one particular type of funding, but not necessarily another. And so that can set up a situation where you're only applying to particular spaces and limiting the type of external funding that's being acquired. So next slide. Oh, and faculty workload challenges, which we are going to discuss in our topic. So obviously this is something that we hear a lot about. If you're teaching, 3 courses, 6 courses, how to be able to engage in research, especially if you are at an institution where you not only have to engage in the research, but you also have to manage the grant. And so this is one of the things that Granted hopes to be a space that we can encourage, but we are going to certainly tap into your thoughts today on this as well. And again, that goes along with the teaching as institutional mission in light of research, right? So sometimes that research can almost be seen as adversarial to the mission. And how do we change make cultural changes that encourage research, but also don't try to transform an institution into something that it's not, right? Make it a part of the mission. And so these are some challenges that people have brought to us, so that we know about already in the research enterprise. And so then there are certainly some ideas when it comes to what Granted has to offer that can address these challenges. So first one. So obviously strengthens the nation's research enterprise is the goal of Granted. We want gains in primarily primarily undergraduate institutions and emerging research institutions and minority serving institutions, right? But again, that doesn't just mean those institutions are going to be involved. Everyone has a role to play here, and we want to see things that are going to lift all boats, right? And national transformation of the research enterprise is the broader impact. And that is something that is going to occur over time. And so every investment that we are making, we want to learn from, right? So next bullet. So a lot of things that we are thinking about: workforce development, hiring research enterprise and staff, research on the research enterprise itself, evaluating existing training programs and scaling effective training programs, right? Research on the sustainability of programs. Sustainability is a big issue, and we know this is a place where we need to pay more attention, and also it's an important part of a proposal if it comes into Granted. Transferable ways of improving post-award project and program management, things that people can learn from each other, and identifying practices and coming up maybe with new approaches. Maybe there is a new position that needs created to help in this area. Let's be innovative. Let's think of what that looks like. Again, this is pushing this idea, that Alicia mentioned earlier, of a revolution. So research leadership development, knowledge management, and sharing systems for research enterprise content, and so many other things. And that's really why we are here today. And so I will turn it over to Kim.
Okay, so that was a lot of information, great information. There will be time at the end of the presentation for questions. We can't see you all, so I think if you have questions now, go ahead and put them in the chat so that you don't forget them, and we can start seeing what people are thinking, what's bubbling up to the surface. But I want to give you all a chance to sort of just take hold of what you just heard, because we're going to start our what I hope is not a chaotic part of the presentation, but we're going to start the next phase of this presentation, where we want to hear from you all. We want to encourage you to share your insights. And we have brought with us three topics, which I'll introduce in a couple minutes. Actually, each one of us is going to introduce a topic. But let me tell you a little bit about what's going to happen for the next 40 or so minutes of the presentation. So we are going to, forgive my technology here. So we're gonna randomly rapture everybody into a breakout room. And within each of the breakout rooms, you'll find a topic. All right, so we have 3 different topics that we would like the different breakout rooms to think about today. We've provided some seeds. We'll introduce those in a moment, some discussion seeds. You don't have to discuss every one. There are a lot of them on there. So pick a seed or 2 that the group feels like is really compelling. You have some insights, some comments, some opinions about. And you're going to want to assign a scribe. So this is someone who can capture all of that information and then can boldly present that information out, I guess, in the chat, right? Because we won't be able to see you guys, but someone who can capture that and then put that out for the rest of the group to see, to experience, to hear really what is servicing and what you all are talking about. The Granted team, that's 3 of us, Alicia, Dina, and I, will visit all the different rooms. So we each have sort of a favorite topic, and we're going to compile all the information that we hear from you guys, the insights, the thoughts, the comments, the feedback, And we'll return that back to the FDP, either Susan or Sarah, just to reflect back out to you guys, because again, you guys are the experts. We want to hear from you, and we're happy to engage with this group and hear what you have to say. So before I introduce the topic slides, I want to give you guys the overarching mission. Okay, so it's pretty easy. So tell us within these topics what the opportunities are. Where are the opportunities? So as you're discussing things, think about that question or those questions. What and where are the opportunities? Okay, so topic 1. So you heard Alicia introduce this a little earlier in the presentation. Here's the data to back that up. So fiscal year 2020, almost $90 billion was expended by institutions of higher education. You can see how it breaks out by different funding sources. And as you all know, it takes a lot of human capital, especially staff and administration, to manage this funding. So, you know, as you think about these discussion seeds, if you land in this topic group, think about what would happen if there wasn't staff at your university to manage this research funding. What difference would it make to your institution? How would it impact your ability to recruit faculty? How would it impact your students and their access to a research experience? You know, I think I'm hopeful that we're conveying that, you know, we've heard and we know, I think we all know that the systems that support either competing for or managing sponsored research funding are fragile, especially at emerging research institutions, again, defined as those institutions that receive less than 50 million in research funding per year. So in these institutions, not having research support staff and administrators is a structural barrier. So we want to hear, you know, what your insights are, what your ideas are about how to build an intentional research enterprise workforce. Okay, please talk about any of these discussion seeds. Maybe you've got other ideas. Bring those out. Again, be bold, be ambitious, assign a good scribe who can capture everything and then get everything into the chat. So that's topic number 1. Dina, topic number 2.
All right, so here we want to think about the granted sort of wheel as a whole and as the research enterprise as a whole. And so we want to think about the, as we were saying, the fragility of the enterprise. So thinking about these sectors, you know, where are you seeing areas that are robust? Where are you seeing areas that are particularly vulnerable? You know, what would happen if you lose someone in these different spaces? How do they work together? How do they impact each other? How could they be engaging or impacting each other in a more successful or sort of a positive synergistic way? You know, what are thoughts about resourcing isolated communities? And these don't have to necessarily be geographically isolated communities. They sort of, as I'm calling them, collaboratively isolated communities that maybe just aren't as networked. They could be right down the road from a big R1, but they don't necessarily have those relationships. You know, how are ways in which we can think about supporting infrastructure in collaborative or consortium-based ways, backbone organizations, different types of models for support infrastructure? And how do we reduce administrative burden, you know, for staff and faculty? Are there technological ways of thinking about this that would increase access? Are there ways to streamline, improve communication and engagement? And then also, you know, we're thinking about how we are engaging the research enterprise community more broadly. So a lot of you haven't heard about Granted. You know, where are you hearing about these types of different opportunities? And, you know, we saw lots of things in research administration and research development. We didn't necessarily see many things in post-award, hence the DCL that you see right now, but also places like compliance and tech transfer and you know, federal and university and industry partnerships, for example. You know, so how do we get the word out to folks about this opportunity, and how do we engage them like we are today, hopefully, in thinking about it? And so those are just some of the things that we are going to touch on in topic 2. Again, as Kim says, you can pick your favorite thing.
Okay, thanks, Dina. All right, Alicia, you want to introduce topic 3 to the group?
So topic 3 is a little bit different, but this is something that we feel is standing in the way of great progress. So we've defined this kind of as the conundrum of teaching and research. We don't want to say versus, but it is conundrum, it seems. So this can go in a lot of different ways. If you wanted to talk about it as you hear this sort of dichotomy as well, and you've often, or maybe even at your institutions, have tried to figure out how you might be able to resolve this. I'd give one example is some institutions have significant structures for lecturers, instructors, visiting assistant professors, and so on. And that's how they cover some of the workload that releases the tenure line faculty to be able to do research. But how is it in terms of like the nation's research competitiveness, our ability to have innovative, fabulous ideas and so on, if teaching in some contexts is seen as a block to that, what is it that we can do to address this? So we know that this looks different in different types of institutions. And so if there's a way in which to maybe talk about potential solutions in one type of institution, what it might look like in another institution, that would be interesting as well. We're very interested in kind of the messaging and the way in which institutions either ignore this complaint or they embrace it and they try to resolve it in some way. And then also, where can some of the solutions come from? Is it about financial investments? NSF, we give out money, you know, should we be funding more faculty clusters? Should that be a solution? Is it culturally driven? So even if there were more and more and more people would still complain about this or see it as a block. Is it having to do with helping individuals think differently about their workload and their time management and so on? So there's a whole lot of different things, but we feel like, and again, this kind of seems a little different from the granted wheel, but we feel like this is engagement of the audience that the research enterprise directly serves. And if part of that audience just isn't engaging, then this is a problem in access. So this is our third topic.
Okay, thanks to you both. So now our behind the scenes partners, let's say this. Let's brainstorm within our groups for about 15 minutes. Let's report out for about 15 minutes. Report out meaning get everything into the chat, scribes that you can from your breakout rooms. We'll read those aloud, share them. Folks can read the chat as well. And then we'll have 15 minutes or so for questions. So with that, I'm gonna we'll get you guys all into breakout rooms and we'll come visit based on the topic that we introduced, just to see how folks are doing. So, all right, good luck. Let's hope this technology works.
Hello, everybody. I just opened up all the breakout rooms. The topics overview that they all talked about is also in the chat. So.
Profession, because on the one hand, it's gotten to be too many things for one person to know how to do, but on the other hand, by splitting it off into different responsibilities, it takes away some of that sort of team feeling. And then sort of the emergence of this, the pre-award specialists who maybe get all the glory of the grant writing and not, and not, doesn't the effort, the full effort involved is not always fully understood. So we also talked about AI and how AI maybe can help with some of that, like leveling off some of the more mundane tasks, so more people can participate in the more interesting tasks, but also that maybe the AI should be applied on the funding side too, to rethink how the requirements for awards and to reduce the paperwork. Because if everybody's going to submit a chat GPT written support letter of support, maybe there shouldn't be letters of support anymore. Maybe it should be done a different way. So we talked about that too. I don't think we had any great ideas for new positions, but I think those were the main themes that we were talking about.
Thanks a lot, Bridget. That's great. Anybody else from a breakout room that discussed topic 1 want to add something new, unique?
I think along the,
Go ahead.
so my name is Dawn Neal. We were in breakout room 1 and I just typed directly into the chat. So I apologize. Our notes are a little fragmented, but along those same lines, we were talking about that some institutions have pre-award, post-award, that's what we have. And then others have more of a kind of cradle to grave, like people doing both sides of this. And we were wondering if there might be merit in sort of examining some of those best practices, definitely getting engaged with the staff on both sides, because they undoubtedly have a different perspective on a lot of what goes on the day-to-day. And maybe there are ways to kind of think about new models of how we divide that labor in ways that would better facilitate engagement, right?
Thank you, Dawn. Anyone else from topic 1? Going once, going twice?
We had,
Go ahead,
Great.
Sylvia.
okay, feel free to jump in too, Sherry. We were, I think, in breakout 2, but we talked about topic 1. Anyway, we had a couple of interesting things. Jennifer Rodas specifically said that they have a research administrator rotator program for their graduates, that they take 3 months and rotate into different positions throughout their institution. I thought that was absolutely fascinating to think about what that might lead to. We had a couple of others. Jody Kennedy specifically targets the financial and accounting grads. I know as I've looked at it, I kind of haven't paid attention to that group, but thinking about maybe possibly seeing if we can add a graduate certificate onto one of the financial tracks that has to do specifically with research administration was what was going through my mind. I just this semester reached out to our MPA program and offered to teach the intro to grants course so that I could change it into an intro to research administration course. And I've just begun that road to see what we can do there as well. So Sherry, feel free to add your piece too.
Oh, we also discussed how it's hard. People just don't know about the field. So how do you get people interested in joining the field or wanting to get a degree if they don't even know about it? And I, as a previous graduate student, also have that passion of corrupting graduate students if they don't want to go into teaching or industry, especially if they're getting near the career. Hey, what are you thinking about? Have you thought of research administration? But I would love to get some sort of internship program where they get to rotate through all the areas, pre-award, post-award, compliance, tech transfer. There's so many things that they could do and find their little niche and still be working with that research and science. And also, we talked about having the right temperament to go into research administration, because not everybody can handle that stress.
So thank you all groups who talked about topic 1. These are fantastic ideas, fantastic observations. We've got topic 2 and topic 3 insights to share. So is there the groups that did the topic 2, the growing access to research support and service infrastructure? Anyone want to share out the highlights? Cynthia.
Yeah, I'll speak for my group, but hopefully they'll jump in if they need to. We talked a little bit about, a lot of institutions have systems and use different systems, and is there a way to think about for some institutions that may not be able to always know the best one that's going to fit? Is there a way to standardize that more effectively? Is there a standardization of systems and processes that can be shared across institutions? Or even a shared service model of resources and expertise, so that those institutions that has one person can tap into, a network. I think we all network well in our jobs with other colleagues across the nation even, but would there be a place that can be more streamlined and more focused for similar types of research, similar types of institutions? Another one that we were just at the end of, so we kind of got cut off on, was talking about post-award project management. More and more these large collaborative proposals and center grants and things where you might be a piece of a larger proposal. The need for a project manager is there, but we don't necessarily have those skills. So should we be building the project management skills and then be, allocating them to different projects and those sorts of things? And anyone on my group, feel free to jump in if I misspoke.
Or any other topic 2 discussants, any highlights, anything additional to share? We've got that topic 3, insights and opportunities looming. It's really sort of out of the ordinary to ask folks about this question. So if there's nothing else on topic 2, let's talk topic 3.
Oh, we got a couple hands raised.
Oh, Laura and Melissa, are you guys topic 2? You want to add some topic 2?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
my room was
Yeah.
was topic 2.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sorry, I didn't see you.
We talked a little bit, really focusing in on sort of the shared services type of idea. And a lot of large institutions have toyed with shared services types of models that might help elucidate some of the opportunities and challenges. So one of the great opportunities is that if you're creating shared services, then you're creating a group that has more people in it, that provides, more opportunities for development for the people that are in that group, for them to learn from each other. Maintenance of expertise, right? So if one area only does one thing once a year, if you've got more people that are servicing more areas, you might not lose the expertise until that item comes up again, the next year, kind of a thing. One of the challenges, kind of going back to the earlier comment about systems of a shared services, is that you would need all of the sort of customers of that shared services model to be using consistent systems and consistent processes. We'd also need to make sure that if all of those people have different auditors, well, either that they all have the same auditor, or that, the auditors of the institutions in that consortium all agree to audit to a similar standard or similar requirements, because, in the diversion in institution process sometimes happens because we all have different auditors with different perspectives. And I think, so I see Alicia's comment in the chat. I mean, I think like single IRB can make it work, as long as there are sufficient resources for the shared services. I think that they could probably figure out how to navigate those different state lines. We also talked a little bit about, maybe one of the things with greatest potential for outsourcing is either training of faculty or training of research administrators. So, sometimes one of the things that is like a burden for a smaller institution is really coming up with programs to ensure development. If the staff is smaller, then, they don't have the same type of internal development opportunities. And then also, sometimes asking a larger institution that's pairing with a smaller institution in one of these large collaborative projects to sort of mentor and capacity build is an option, although it is also a burden then on that larger institution. So, somehow creating some of these shared services models would also make it easier for a large institution to pair with smaller institutions and might make that happen more often.
Thank you so much, Melissa, and your group. Very insightful comments. Laura, did you want to share out some unique ideas from topic 2?
I don't know how, well, I joined my group just before the warning bell went off. And so I'm piggybacking on the last comment that I'm sorry, the first lady spoke about. I didn't even catch my group's name. That's how short I was on there. But it addresses the same topic, the shared services model, more from the perspective of under-resourced schools needing not only some fundable enterprise that would not deplete their own resources, but be significant to their growth, but also to have expertise that they may not have available either in their environment, local. I'm speaking for tribal colleges, historical Black colleges, and a lot of the underserved schools that may not be location-wise accessible to staff that could support, but they could reach out and be part of this model. And in doing that, I'm looking at the NASA, the Shared Services Center, a model that NSF could, or even have a grant that allows a larger entity to do that. But NSF could offer this service from 2 perspectives: a off-site OSP office for these under-resourced schools in terms of staff that could help them do some things, but also maybe something like an expert online where it's a user group that's active all the time. If you run into a problem, you can put a question out in the chat, try to get it resolved right away, because there's so many experts in those particular areas that are always listening and chiming in. You know, you go to your online bank and they said, "Can I help you?" You know, so having some access to a resource base with answers as they go through. So if they don't have the expertise, they can reach out to someone maybe at a R1 who is really good at doing something, maybe someone who has a pre-award experience with NSF. Maybe it could even be segmented by agency, whereas an expert online about NSF grants, pursuing and managing NSF grants versus NIH grants versus whatever. But that would take advantage of the AI concept that we were talking about. And it would also engage people who are professionals involved in it, so you know you're getting the right expertise, but it will also create a training platform. So it's, you know, those kinds of shared services model, if you structure it right, could address all 3 of your topic areas. That's what my thought was. And I resonated with all of the responses about the shared services that the 2 ladies before me just spoke about. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you. Well, so, yeah, I mean, this is always the richest part, right? And we're always like sort of down to time, but can we hear from some folks that engaged in in topic 3, the conundrum, the research and teaching balanced. Does anyone have any insights this here? Looks like Susan, go ahead.
Yes, thank you.
I'm sorry, Susan, I think I muted you.
Oh, there we go. We also talked about some of the other things that have been mentioned, especially with the consortium and shared services concept, with the idea that those would be things that would free up administrative time that could then be used to help our faculty more in their tasks. Now, the issue of release time is a problem in our smaller institutions with the teaching loads. And maybe we can't always give them release time from our grants, but maybe we can make sure that they're funded in the summer when they might not have grant funding or might not have a full summer's worth of grant funding, so that they can focus exclusively on their research during that period, because that's not something that we necessarily see right now. Another thing about AI, in that session on Tuesday morning, I just got so excited thinking about how we could potentially harness some AI tools to help reduce the burden associated with the, manual tasks that we all are involved in. And, whether we're research administrators or departmental administrators, our faculty are at this point managing their own grants badly, I will say. So we would want to be able to relieve them of that as much as we can. And again, a lot of it just has to do with people's time, whether it's the research office, whether it's a departmental administrator or somebody in the post-award side. Some of those AI tools I think could be really helpful.
Thank you, Susan. Laura, looks like you have your hand up. I can see you.
I second what Susan said. We also talked about course buyout, and then the discussion led to ways of maybe showing options for that. So, the different schools have different approaches perhaps, and having that out there so that faculty researchers could see that and say, oh, Alicia was in our group, and she had, said, that maybe, then they could be inspired to put that in their grants, like, oh, I could do this perhaps. I thought that was well put. We also talked about learning in the teaching, so using your teaching as a way to also move your research forward in some way, or having the teaching in the lab. But we recognize that can be difficult too. That takes extra time because that's a lot of teaching. But maybe there are ways to do this, and maybe that gets to AI as well. Maybe AI can, help teaching be more efficient too. And maybe that's a little out of our realm, but in those monitoring of projects that the students are doing and or training to be able to do something in the lab. I don't know. So it all fits together perhaps.
Amanda, please go ahead.
One of the things we also talked a little bit about was, and we talked about what Susan and Laura also talked about, but was the fact that so many institutions are defunding, and the government as well as defunding arts and humanities programming. And so that is cutting down kind of those incentives to collaborate across different boundaries, or feel like you can pull in some of your partners and do interdisciplinary work, especially if you're at a PUI. And then because there aren't those grants there, it creates less incentive for a PUI or an ERI to even set up a grants office or have somebody who's specialized in the field, because maybe they have a really small STEM program and they're more focused on the arts and humanities. And so, having more rich opportunities at the funding level will also help to cross-pollinate and get people excited and encouraged to do research as well.
Thank you. Anyone else? There's such great comments in the chat too about all the topics. And if folks want to put anything in the chat that we haven't heard about, feel free to, please. We're gonna move on to our questions section, but Alicia, Dina, I don't know about you guys, but I heard some really good ideas for granted proposals. You guys know what you just did, right? You just developed ideas for granted. You developed granted aligned ideas within your groups, amongst folks that you may be geographically distinct from, may not even know. You came together and you thought about these topics. So for the 86% of the field who hadn't thought about submitting a granted proposal, it's all there with you guys right now. You have it. This group has it within them. And we're here to help. So please consider it. We will get this information, this resource out to you all. But if something sparked, something resonated today, don't let it lie. We need bold, ambitious, creative folks like you all to transform this enterprise. Okay, so I'm not going to put the slides back up, but we'd love to answer any questions that people have. You can raise your hand. I think Sarah's going to help us if there are questions in the chat. But we're here for you and we'll stay as long as people want to stay. Sarah said that we could go a little over, although I know this is it's the end of the FDP meeting for most, so but we are happy to answer any questions. Actually, you know what I will do is I will share our last slide because it has some good resource information on it for you all. Let me quickly get my tech going here. So anything that's underlined in the presentation when you guys get the deck is hyperlinked, so you can just click on things. But so if you have questions, you can get any of us at granted@nsf.gov. You can find the program description funding opportunity. You can find either of the 2 new DCLs through our program website. We would love for the folks who are here to review for Granted. Our reviewers come from this community. Our community reviews these proposals. So if you're interested in becoming a Granted reviewer, click on that link. You can also find the link on our website. And then if you're interested in being a Granted program director, we've got rotational program director opportunities open. You can find more information about those opportunities as well. So that's what Dina and I are. It's a great team. It's a great program, as you know, and with that, questions, we're happy to answer any questions. Eric.
Hi, I was wondering, I mean, this has been very, very beneficial to hear and very helpful, stimulating. I'm wondering, is there a forum for folks on this right now to talk further, collaborate? Is there any context, a listserv, having ongoing discussions? That's an open question. I just don't know if there's any.
That is a very good question. Oh, Susan might have something to answer to that. I don't know if she does. There is, I think, like an ERI listserv, but I don't know necessarily what it is used for or if this is the right area for that. Susan can talk more about that.
That's a really good point, Sarah. We do have an ERI listserv, and I will say that even though ERIs are defined one way or another, depending on the context, for the FDP, we're pretty open to interest by non-ERI institutions as well, because we recognize that sometimes, you know, that the threshold is gray. It's not black and white. So, and it can change over time as well. So I think it would be perfectly fine to sign up for our FDP ERI listserv. And Sarah can, I think, help figure out what that is.
In the chat.
Yeah, good. Okay. I was going to ask a question really quickly. What type of time commitment would one need to consider before offering one's services as a Granted reviewer?
Well, Dina, jump in. I'll take the first shot at this. So, you know, we have gotten into a good rhythm with putting together our panels. So it's not onerous, right? Because it's not like we're a directorate yet. So we are holding one-day panels, anywhere from maybe 5 to 6 proposals. So it's very, very comfortable at this point. We're hoping that that ramps up.
But it does take, you know, time to review. And what we do try to give you at least a month to review things. And so, you know, even if it takes you a few hours to review each grant, and then of course you participate in the panel, you are compensated for participating in the panel. So there is that at least. But I would say, you know, if you can't find about 16 hours over the course of the month, then that would be, you know, I'd say that's a fair, over a month. That's a fair.
Yeah. I would say
or less.
2 to 4 hours per proposal, depending on, you know, how well we'd like you to be thorough, but yeah, 2 to 4 hours per proposal.
How many months of the year is that expected, since it's a rolling submission?
Well, so we invite folks as we start to stage a panel. So it's So it's just a one-time commitment. You're not signing
Okay.
up for an entire year or anything. And we would love to be able to, recruit enough reviewers, enough expertise across all of the different sectors that we wouldn't have to go back to the same reviewers, more than once a year, or even, less frequently than that. But there's a lot of expertise out there.
We're trying very hard to make sure that these proposals are actually reviewed by your peers. If we're asking you to lead them, we want your peers to be reviewing them. And so that's why our reviewer pool is so important. We've got an incredible response so far. And thanks to anybody that's on this, that's already volunteered, because we really appreciate it.
And it's not like you have to have reviewed for NSF before. You just you have to know the program, you have to know the program description, what the mission of the program is, and we'll help you through the rest. Any other questions? I can't see the entire field. So if you have a question, go ahead and shout it out.
There was a question just asking about if the chat would be saved. Yes, it is being saved. And if the NSF granted team is okay with it, we can post it along with the recording.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And we'll, true to our word, we'll sort of compile things, sort of compartmentalize and, to the extent that it needs to be refined or anything, we'll do that and get that back to you, Sarah.
Perfect.
I just had a quick question, just kind of curious. I wondered if any of the other federal agencies were considering collaborating with you or expanding your wonderful idea.
Thank you for that question. Alicia, you want to take that one?
What was the first part of the question?
Other federal agencies that may be wanting to hop on the granted bandwagon.
Well, I've actually had several conversations very recently with other federal agencies. I think part of the challenge is that helping them notice some of the same things we notice about the research enterprise. And, NSF is very much known for a very broad mission that supports, the basic STEM, basic science and discovery and whatnot. So I think that some other agencies are like, well, since you're taking care of it, this is great. But I think that what I was really glad that you all engaged in is a discussion of shared services, because we've had some discussions with other agencies around that concept. We've already encouraged people to submit proposals for conferences and convenings. As Dina said, we'll be announcing those as a collection of awards soon. But, we will always take conferences and convening proposals. We'll take planning grants. We'll take all sorts of things. And so, you can always send us a concept idea in email and say, we get a lot of money from NIH as well as NSF. We would love it if both agencies would work together to help support increasing our, it doesn't have to be that way, of course, but, we love to be able to have a comment like the community is asking for this.
Yeah, this is Laura Lee again. NIH has a program where you can write for support to build up your sponsored programs office. And then NASA has a professional in residence opportunity to work in the education department that would coordinate with some of the schools that need additional assistance. But that's almost like a professional in residence for a year kind of approach. So both of those are good. The other pool that we could look at are retiring feds who do the grants management administration roles from the monitoring of awardees side, bringing them into the loop with that knowledge to the campuses that maybe have a lot of grants from their agencies where they're retiring. They're always looking for additional post-federal employment jobs in their retirement, and they bring a lot of expertise. So if we can somehow capture them, whether in that expert on call idea or some other way to get them involved, that's a group that would leverage our knowledge on campus. We know how to help submit and manage proposals. They know what is required from the sponsor side to reinforce what we are telling our faculty is needed. And so it would be a good support structure for this group, I believe.
Thank you, Laura. Any other questions?
There's
So,
nothing.
yeah. Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, I was just saying there's nothing in the chat right now.
Oh, there is something in the chat.
No, I think we're good.
Virology. I want to make folks available of one, aware of one other resource that wasn't on our slide, but I'll put it on for the posting. And that is that every Wednesday, the Granted Team convenes an office hour from 3 to 4 Eastern. And it's a chance for folks to come and ask questions about Granted. There's usually one of us or two of us who are available to go into a breakout session to talk confidentially about an idea, granted idea. We have robust attendance, robust repeat attendance. You're welcome to come every week to hear more about this opportunity. You know, I know some people have met collaborators through the office hour sessions. So again, you can find Zoom access links on the website. Just for this crowd here, I tell you this, but we're not going to have an office hour next Wednesday because we're actually going to be in panel. So that's a good thing, but we will, fingers crossed, if we have an appropriation, right? If we have a budget, a CR, whatever it takes, we will have an office hour starting in October, the first week in October on that Wednesday, again, 3 to 4. So join us. You can pop in and pop out as your questions or ideas, you know, as they serve you. So again, if you have questions that you think of after we say goodbye today, reach out to us at granted@nsf.gov. Thank you all. I know this is the last session. Thank you all for your energy and your enthusiasm and all those granted projects that you came up with. Anything else, Alicia or Dina, you want to say? And again, thanks to FDP, Susan and Sarah and the whole team who helped stage this big experiment of bringing us all together virtually and helping us all work together. Thank you very much. It was really a pleasure to talk with all you guys today.
Thanks,
Yeah,
everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.